topic of 5 top tips for creating stable oleogel formulations. My name is Anna Green and I am the Education Manager here at Formula Botanica. And today I am joined by Brooke Medhurst, who is one of our tutors at Formula Botanica. Brooke, welcome.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you everyone for joining us.
So we are here to talk about a really exciting topic today. We would love to hear from you in the comments. Let us know where you are from, where you are joining us from. And we are here to talk about oleogels, easily one of the most exciting formulation topics out there. In fact, we recently polled our members in our membership site, the lab at Formula Botanica, and asked them what their favorite piece of content in the membership was, and by a landslide, oleogels was the winner. So we are here to talk to you about oleogels today, to give you some top tips for getting started. We know that you want to formulate with them. Brooke, could you tell us a little bit about what you do at Formula Botanica and let people know who you are, please?
Of course. So my name is Brooke Medhurst. Hi, everyone. I'm the formulation tutor at Formula Botanica, which means I work as part of the education team around anything to do with formulation. So that works in the lab, the formulations that go into the lab. Our grading, lovely team of grading tutors, I work with them around grading our students' coursework and all of the content that goes into making Formula Botanica run. So our course notes, all of the free content you get, our masterclasses, everything sort of runs through us as a team. And I'm involved in doing all of that kind of thing. So I love working with formulations, and formulation is absolutely my favourite part of my job. And oleogels is definitely one of the most fun things to work with. So I'm looking forward to giving you all some tips.
Yes, absolutely. Oleogels are a fantastic thing to formulate. They are really, really fun. They are versatile products. And we'll start by sort of explaining a little bit what an oleogel is. So if you've never heard of one before, we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, thank you so much, Brooke, for letting us know what you do at Formula Botanica. Obviously, I'm the education manager, so I oversee our education team, and we are involved in lots of different content, as Brooke has already said, teaching our courses, running our membership site, which is called the Lab at Formula Botanica. And this content is from the lab, which is very exciting. We're giving you a little sneak preview of what our members get in the lab today. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining us live. I can see people from Canada, Albania, Las Vegas. Welcome everybody. So let's start by explaining what an oleogel is. Essentially, there's different kinds of gels that you can formulate. There's water-based gels. An oleogel is an oil-based gel. And it has a very different texture, very different function to a water-based gel. Water-based gels can be leave-on gels, they can be rinse-off gels, they can have surfactants so they can foam, but oily gels are generally for rinse-off products, but you can create things like leave-on products with them as well, almost like balms, ointments type products. But they are great for creating a sort of oily rinse-off texture. So they have the ability to transform from oil to milk, depending on the oil gelling agent that you're using. They are really, really versatile. Oleogels are great, and this is a topic that's very close to my heart for people with sensitive skin, because it has been shown, they've been shown to be less disruptive to your skin's barrier than other cleansing methods, which makes them really unique and really special. And they are so, so much fun to formulate. How much do you love for formulating oleogels, Brooke?
10 out of 10. I really enjoy them. And I think they're such a unique product as well. There's so much you can do with them. And the rinse off for them for cleansing products is fantastic. They're so nourishing to the skin, and you don't strip any of your... I've got quite dry skin as well, so they help my skin a lot. And they're just so much fun to work with. You can make them all different sorts of colours, different textures, add in fun things like jojoba beads and make them exfoliating. There's just so many options. So yes, absolutely recommend them.
Absolutely. So as we've already said, these are topics that are covered in our formulation membership site, which is called the Lab at Formula Botanica. It helps you up-level your formulation skills. And we have a free webinar coming up. So hopefully somebody can pop the link to the free webinar in the comments. But it is a webinar where we'll be discussing the topic of vitamin C, another really exciting, very popular topic that we have covered in the lab at Formula Botanica, and there will be a sort of free taster. Today we're going to be talking about oleogels. We're going to give you our 5 top tips for getting started with them. So let's look at those top tips. I'd love people to let us know in the comments if you have made an oleogel before. Just put yes or no in the comments. We would love to know whether you have made one or not. So we've covered a little bit what they are. These are oily gels, so where you're using oils to create the gel structure rather than water or surfactants or anything else. And they are really, really versatile, great for sensitive skin, great for makeup removal. You can also create things like masks and other things as well. They are a fantastic formulation to make, and the texture is lots and lots of fun. So let's start with top tip number 1. We are going to give you our 5 top tips because we know that sometimes people struggle to get started with oleogels. So we're going to give you our 5 top tips to get you started. And top tip number 1 is keep it simple to master technique. Brooke, why are we telling people to keep it simple?
So fundamentally, oleogels are a different kind of technique than you do with lots of different sort of formulas. They are something that has a little bit of a learning curve to it, but they are something that you can make by hand, and we recommend you start really simple so that you get to know the gelling agent you're working with. Different gelling agents sort of have different requirements, and it's best to understand the process, understand how to work with it, and make sure you're using a really simple formula to start with so that you understand all of those criteria that your gelling agent has. So rather than adding in lots of different ingredients which can change up the outcome of your formulation, it's best to try and start working with one oil and one gelling agent and sort of get your technique down, make sure you understand how to use that gelling agent, and then you can add things then as you go. For some gelling agents then have interactions with different ingredients, and you need to be aware of those. Not all of them do, but some of them do. And one we would recommend starting with is Sucrogel AF Bio. That's my favorite one to work with because it's really easy. And you can also make things like emulsions and stuff with it. It's quite a versatile product to work with. And it's really easy to use. It's the best one for sort of starting out. There are others that we cover in the mini lab as well, but I think that's the one we would recommend for starting and making sure you keep it really simple.
Yes, Sucrogel AF Bio is a really easy one to start with because you don't need any additional ingredients. And my first oleogel that I made was simply Sucrogel AF Bio and one oil. And I did it by hand with a mini whisk and a large beaker. And that was my first introduction. And it is the simplest way to get started. As Brooke said, when you start to look at more complex formulations and you start to explore the world of oleogels, maybe you want to compare different gelling agents. They each have their own unique properties. They each have, different things that you need to understand. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in top tip number 2. But starting really, really simple, and it is possible to make these by hand, is the best way. And you really need to understand, and we'll talk about this again in the later tips, but the method here, when it comes to oleogels, the method is absolutely crucial and requires some patience, but the final product at the end, the final formula, is well worth your effort and your time. We have a lab Facebook group for our membership site members, and we have had so many beautiful oleogels pictures posted over the time that we've had that mini lab published. People absolutely love making these formulas. We want you to love it and enjoy it too, which is why we're doing this live. So top tip number 2, understand the different properties of gelling agents. So we've explained already that there's different gelling agents. They have individual properties. Something like Sucragel AF Bio is an oil to sort of milk. It will rinse off really nice and easily, which is why it's great for making cleansing balms, for example. And some need additional stabilizers, and especially when you're looking to scale up your batches. So it's really important that you understand all the different types. We talk you through all of them in the mini lab itself. We talk you through a selection that are available on the market, and we compare and contrast for you so you can understand the differences. But really understanding that gelling agent and how it's going to work, how it's going to form its gel structure, the ingredients that it can work well with and not work well with, interactions, things like that, is really, really important. What else would you like to add there, Brooke?
I think you covered it really well. I think there's lots of things to look into when you're working with oleogels, but as Anna said, you want to look and make sure that they don't need any external stabilizers, and look into the ingredients that you're using them with. So the oils you're using, do they have any requirements of oils that they can work with or not? Generally, I think most sorry, I'm tripping over my words there. Most gelling agents are very good with that, but one thing to look out for is there's not many gelling agents available. They're not like when you have emulsifiers. There's quite a big variety of emulsifiers on the market. When it comes to gelling agents, there is a smaller pool of things that you can look for. It's not a tiny pool. There's a few of them, but it's not as big as something like emulsifiers or surfactants, for example. So when you're looking into making oleogels, you might have to look a bit harder to find some in your area, but they are definitely worth the effort.
Yes, absolutely they are. They are such fantastic, fantastic ingredients. That takes us on to top tip number 3, which is patience, persistence, and perseverance. So we've explained already that the method of manufacture is absolutely key when it comes to creating these oily gels. When you are adding the oil to your gelling agent, that is when the gel structure is formed. And if you do that too quickly or you don't follow the manufacturer's guidelines, you can break the gel structure, and that's when you have an unstable oleogel. And you can see sometimes as you're making the oleogel, if you've sped it up too much, because it might sort of instantly start to look not quite right. You might have something that is not thick. You might have something that is very runny. Sometimes you can salvage those, but the reality of it is it's best to really take it slower than you think you need to. Be very patient. It is worth the effort at the end. I think about it a little bit like cooking something like a risotto, where you need patience of adding that liquid little bit by little bit. The end result is worth it, so persevere with it. But yeah, it's definitely that gel structure needs to be formed when you're adding the oils in. So if you want that gorgeous, silky, combined texture, if you want a stable oleogel that feels beautiful on the skin, that is a nice gel structure, you have to create that in a very patient way.
Absolutely. And I think we can't stress that enough, that oleogels are a labor of love when it comes to making them. That applies if you're making them by hand, or if you're making them with something like more of a mixer, you still have to add them in really, really slowly. And as Anna said, slower than you think you might do, because it's better to add them smaller and for it not to split than for it to go. And because once it's gone, it's very difficult to bring it back. Not entirely impossible, but a lot harder. So definitely sit there, stir it gently, keep an eye on it, and you're looking for it to go glossy each time before you add any more oil into your beaker. get yourself something like a little pipette and go in sort of one pipette at a time and do it really nice and slowly and gently, and then you'll see it sort of builds up. And as you get more of an oleogel in there, you can then add it in a little bit quicker, but not much quicker, because I know I've made the mistake a few times myself where you get to the end of it and think, oh, there's about sort of 2 or 3 pipettes worth there, I'll just pour it all in and go, and that's when it's going to split on you. So that's why we say patience, perseverance, and persistence, because it is going to take that little bit of patience to get you through over that end goal. But absolutely, they are worth it when you get there. And it's a labor of love, but it's quite fun. Just sort of put your headphones in, maybe listen to some music or a book or something, and sit there and stir. And it's not something that's strenuous to do, but it is time consuming. So it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just going to show this comment here because it illustrates perfectly what we're talking about. It says, I made it by hand with a mini whisk. It tested my patience, but the end result was rewarding. That's exactly how I feel. It does test your patience. It's not a formulation to do if you're stressed, if you're, having a bad day. It's maybe one to leave because it needs a lot of gentle care. But yeah, they are absolutely worth it. So that is good. Okay, so that brings us on to top tip number 4, which is add new ingredients one at a time. We've already kind of said you can start you can make your first oleogel with 2 ingredients. That's what I did. I know Brooke's done the same. But Brooke, why would we be adding new ingredients in sort of one at a time to test the formula and to see how it reacts?
So when you're making a formula and when you're making new formulas in particular, each time you change something, you add in another variable. So if things are going to split, if things are going to be unstable, then each time you add in a new ingredient, you have to look at what's the cause of that instability. So if you start off your oleogels with maybe 10 different oils that you're adding in with your gelling agent, if something goes wrong, that's 10 different ingredients you need to look at to be able to decide what the problem is. If you've got one oil and one gelling agent and it goes really well, that's fantastic. If you then add in a second oil and something goes wrong, you know then more around what's the cause of that. And the same goes for your extracts, the same goes for, because oleogels can incorporate a little bit of sort of glycerin water-based extracts, not too much, but a little bit. And adding things like that is where you start to see more signs of instability. And that comes more down to the method, as we said, but adding the right amount is really crucial there. And the manufacturer will tell you in its guidelines how much it can handle, but adding one at a time is really good to show you how that works. And you can then change things as and when you sort of see any issues cropping up, rather than adding 10 ingredients in one go and having to troubleshoot by going back down. It's much easier to work step by step, start at the beginning and add in slowly, than it is to jump in at the deep end and then try and swim back to shore.
Yes, absolutely. And I would really stress, don't even think about your expensive extracts or adding them in until you are confident with the method and you've had a go. This is why I recommend starting with just one gelling agent and one oil, because, if it's not working, if your tool isn't working, or if you're incorporating it too fast, you'll know, and you haven't wasted lots of precious ingredients. And then afterwards you can build out your formula. And obviously we want you to research your ingredients first, so you do it on paper first and see if there's any potential incompatibilities. But the reality of it is, and in the mini lab I interviewed one of the manufacturers, the main manufacturers of these gelling agents. The reality of it is the practical process, and they've done lots of testing on their ingredients, the practical process can sometimes identify incompatibilities that you didn't know about on paper. So it's really important to test in theory, do your research, and then test in practice. But don't even think about adding in expensive extracts until you are happy with creating a super basic oleogel. And it's still lovely to use, by the way, because the ones that I created that were just 2 ingredient gels, removed makeup like a dream. So I used them all up. They were not wasted by any stretch of the imagination. So that is good. So let's go on. I can see lots of questions coming in, and I will be coming to those soon. We are going to talk a little bit about top tip number 5. And that is, we want stable oleogels. As we've already said, there's lots of reasons why your oleogel might destabilize. It's method of manufacturer, it's ingredient incompatibilities, all sorts of things, the environment, packaging, so many different variables. So we want you to make sure that you stability test. So Brooke, as a starter, if somebody's creating their first oleogel, how long would we say for them to observe their first sample, just to initially get a gauge on whether it's stable or not?
I think in terms of, as long as you're not selling the product, 2 weeks is a really good idea to have a look and see, to make sure it's stable longer term.
Yeah.
2 weeks is a really good starting point. So you can, it's not too long that you have to wait months and months to see if it's going to split, but it's not going to give you shelf life testing, but it's going to give you a really good idea of if your formula is stable. Try also sort of putting it in a few different environments. You know, maybe keep it in your bathroom, put it on a sunny windowsill. All those sort of different environments can really help to sort of show if there's any issues that are going to crop up longer term. But to start with, just keep it on your desk, for example, for 2 weeks. Make sure that it's stable, make sure it doesn't split out, and that will give you a really good idea if it's stable going forward. But one of the nice things with oleogels is if it's going to split, it does tend to do it quite quickly.
Yeah.
So oleogels are not something that you're going to necessarily come to it in 3 months and it's gone, it's split like that. It's most likely, if it's going to go, it's going to go quite quickly. So that 2 weeks should be more than enough time for you to see if it's going to split any longer. As any longer term, and you're going to be looking at sort of more long-term stability testing as you would for selling a product. But when you're first starting and you're just testing your formulations, that's not necessary. We just recommend about 2 weeks, and it gives you a good idea then of how stable your product is.
Yes. Worth noting at this point as well, a lot of oleogels on the market, this is just a shop bought oleogel that I have in my bathroom, but a lot of the oleogels on the market come in this kind of pump packaging that minimizes, it doesn't completely reduce, minimizes the contact with air. I know, Brooke, you've got one to show us that's in a glass jar that you've made. The reason for a lot of oleogels on the market being packaged like this, in this kind of pump container, is because the oleogels, something like sucragel especially, are really, really sensitive to humidity. So they will start to emulsify in a steamy bathroom. You will see a film. If you've got an oleogel in a jar, you will see a film, a white film start to form on your oleogel if you're washing your face with it. They are super, super sensitive to humidity. Somebody asked earlier on if you can use them in hot countries. Well, absolutely you can, but just keep in mind the packaging, because, you know, if you're in a very humid country, they will be affected by that humidity. So it's just something to keep in mind how you package it. You know, obviously for the vast majority of us, when we're starting out, a jar is going to be the easiest thing, but just keep in mind that even if it's just the steam of the shower, your oleogel will start to emulsify. You'll see that white milky film starting to form, and you could lose, you know, your oleogel because you've exposed it to too much water, essentially. So you want to keep that to a minimum. So you can use something like an airless pump. It doesn't completely eliminate the chance of exposure. In fact, you can sort of see a little bit. This is a pink oleogel. And even just that little bit in the spout of the pump has been exposed to humidity in the shower, and it is less clear than it would be if it hadn't been exposed. So it has sort of emulsified a little bit, just that little tiny exposure. So they are really interesting like that. You do have to pay attention to your packaging. And when you're sort of observing your sample, initially it might be easier to have it in something like a jar, because obviously it's difficult to observe in the same way in your airless pump. But for practicality, for practical use, just keep in mind that they do react to water, which is one of the reasons that they're so good, because they rinse off so cleanly. That's why people like using them. So that's just a little tip for you there in terms of packaging them. So those are our 5 top tips. I'm just going to recap them for you. Top tip number 1, keep it really simple to master technique. Top tip number 2, understand the different properties of gelling agents. They all have different pros and cons, and depending on the type of batch you want to make, the type of ingredients you want to incorporate, you have to look at them individually to make your choice. Top tip number 3, patience, perseverance, and persistence. These require sort of a bit of patience when you're putting them together. Top tip number 4, add new ingredients one at a time. And top tip number 5, make sure you stability test. So in our Oleogels mini lab, just to give you a recap, we also give you a comparison of some of the most popular oil gelling agents like Sapogel Q, Sucragel, and we talk about this compare and contrast so that you can choose which oil gelling agent will be the best choice for your formulations. We chat to Alchemy Ingredients, who are the manufacturers of things like Sapogel Q and Sucragel, and we hear directly from them in the mini lab about their products. And we also do a really deep dive into Sucragel because, as we've already said, it's really popular. It creates really beautiful oil to milk cleansers and thick oily gels. And, we explore some of the different types of Sucragel that you can use. So we are now going to just have a quick look at the questions in the comments section. I think we've covered a few already. So let me just go through.
While you look at those, Anna, shall I show the Oleogel I have?
Yeah, please, Brooke. Yeah.
So this is one I made quite a while ago now, but it's a lovely little orange sort of Oleogel. And as Anna said, this is in a screw top jar kind of packaging, which is not ideal for Oleogels, but in terms of observing it long time, it was easy to sort of show you when it's in this kind of jar. But one tip I will have is, if you're going to use a jar, these little caps that come in some jars are very helpful to sort of try and keep as much of the moisture away as you can. And when you're using it, try not to dip your fingers into it. Try to use a spatula or something and make sure it's definitely dry. And that does help to prevent too much of that milky film. If I show you here, this is what our Oleogel looks like. It's a little bit runny, so if I tip it up too much, I'm going to pour it over my laptop, which is not good. But just to sort of show you here, it's got a really nice shiny texture, and they're really, really lovely products. So this one has been knocking around for quite a while now. It's an older one, but this is a good example to show you that can be quite stable long term, provided they're formulated right. And yeah, they're really lovely to work with, and you can make some really nice coloured ones as well, depending on which oils you use. And you can make them clear, you can make them opaque, and it all depends on what kinds of oils you add in.
Yes, fantastic. So our first question, are there gelling agents that require less stirring? Are any of them sort of easier to use than others?
Not particularly, because part of that unique texture is that stirring method. I will say cerebrelina is technically something that you can use to make oleogels. It makes more ointment type oleogels that you would use for things like balms and butters. It doesn't work for oil to milk rinse off products, but it still gives you that oleogel kind of texture. That one is not quite so important when it comes to stirring. You add everything in and melt it down. But when it comes to these kinds of rinse off oleogels, then that method of adding things in and stirring is essentially what builds the oleogel. It's that format doesn't create, that gel matrix doesn't form if you don't do that stirring and adding slowly. So unfortunately, there's not really any that are easier to work with from that perspective.
No, all the Sucragels pretty much require that very slow incorporation of the oils, as Brooke said, for the gel structure to form. Things like Sapogel Q and Cerebellina, you're looking at more sort of, they're capable of creating more leave-on products, more ointmenty products, but they don't have exactly the same skin feel. It's slightly different. So if you want that beautiful rinse off, bouncy gel texture, that's mainly Sucragel that's going to get you there. And yeah, you need to have patience with it, I'm afraid. Somebody else has asked, would you recommend a mini whisk or a spatula? I've only ever used a mini whisk. I'm not sure the spatula would give you enough agitation, but what do you think, Brooke?
I agree. I think mini whisk is definitely the way to go if you can, because it's going to help you to combine those oils with the Sucragel faster. Using a spatula, it just sort of moves things around, but it doesn't help you to incorporate them the same way a mini whisk does. You don't want to be sort of whisking like you're trying to whip cream or anything, but just having enough to movement and agitation to keep it moving. A mini whisk is definitely better for that.
Yes, absolutely. This is a great question. So when we're talking about initially creating just a very simple oleogel to start with, can you do it with any carrier oil?
Pretty much most carrier oils. There's hundreds and hundreds of carrier oils in the market, and depending on what kind of oleogel you want to create, that will vary a little bit, because as we said, different gel forming agents have different requirements. So different ones might have oils that they work not quite so well with. But in general, when starting out, most basic carrier oils will work perfectly fine. So you could use apricot oil, you could use almond oil, grapeseed, sunflower, olive, jojoba. Any of those would all work quite well in general, and then you can start to add more sort of fancier oils, I suppose is one way of putting it, things like buriti oil or hemp seed oil, and adding those in to give it some colour and different textures as you develop on there. But to start with, we would recommend using your sort of more basic carrier oils like your almond, grapeseed, that sort of thing, to give you that good baseline to work with.
Yes. I would start off inexpensive in terms of your carrier oil. And I almost think to start with, if it's if there's less color and it's just a clear oil, that will almost be better for you to be able to start out and to see the clarity with your chosen gelling agent. The more you add in color and things later on, then, like I said, the more variables you've introduced. So simple and inexpensive, whatever you have lying around the house to start with is particularly where I started. But yeah, it's a nice way of sort of, using things that you've already got. Denise has asked, where are oleogels taught? So we teach a whole mini course on oleogels. This is what we're talking about today. This content is directly from our membership, which is called The Lab at Formula Botanica. Somebody has kindly put the lab link in our comments section, so you can check it out. But we are offering a free webinar on another one of the topics in the lab. We teach oleogels, we teach about vitamin C, we teach about the microbiome, we teach so many different fantastic trending topics in the lab. So we have all these little standalone mini courses that you can dip in and out of as you want to. And we talk about oleogels extensively in there. We polled our members and oleogels was one of their favorites. So that's why we're talking to you about it today. Okay, we have a couple more questions to go through. Let me just find another one. So somebody asked, there's a couple of questions and I'm going to tackle them both at once. Somebody asked about shelf life. So obviously you need to conduct some proper stability tests to be able to give you a final shelf life. Somebody else also asked about preservatives and oleogels, and something like Sucragel can incorporate a very small amount of water-based ingredients like glycerin into the formula without needing a preservative in it. However, you need to really carefully follow the manufacturer's guidelines for how much they can incorporate. And yeah, to have an ideal shelf life, you'd need to properly stability test that final formula and observe it carefully to sort of check for any separation, but you don't need a preservative because they are sort of almost self-preserving in their ingredients. Because you've got so much oil content in them, something like a sucragel-based oleogel, they generally don't require a separate preservative. Now, as we've said, packaging does make all the difference here because you don't want people dipping fingers in and things like that. So yeah, you have to think about all of those things, and they have to be tested properly. But they mainly, because of the high oil content, shouldn't need a separate preservative, and they should have a pretty good shelf life. Just to give you an example, I've got some shop bought ones upstairs. This one, for example, most you're looking anywhere between 6 to 9 months, but that will depend on your individual formula. But that's just a rough guide of what can be achieved on the market. Okay, have you got anything else to add there, Brooke? I'm just going to take this final question. So we've got one question left, and that is, I think the gelling agents are too thick. An overhead stirrer might work best. So I've seen a couple of questions about, can we use a magnetic stirrer? Can we use an overhead stirrer? So if people want to do them with machinery and not by hand, Brooke, what can you use to create oleogels?
So you can use a magnetic stirrer. I've made oleogels with magnetic stirrers before as well. Just it depends a little bit on the mixer you're using, and I would recommend that you start it by hand when you start with your small amount of your gelling agent, add in a little bit of oil, and then transfer it then to a magnetic stirrer as you get more of it, because it starts to thin out a little bit. And you can use a kitchen overhead mixer, but that is for big batches. So that's something that you can use if you're making a lot larger batch. You could use it, make sure you use it very slowly. Don't put it sort of whiz it right up to the top. Make sure you use it on a slow setting, and don't use both paddles. Maybe only just use one to sort of like a dough hook to gently sort of mix things together. You can use that, but again, bigger batches it's better for that, because trying to stir things by hand in sort of, I don't know, 500-gram batches would be really difficult. So you would want something like a magnetic stirrer or a KitchenAid mixer to mix that together. If you're going to use something like a mixer, make sure it's one that you use for formulation only. It's not the same one you bake your cakes in, because you'd get a bit of contamination there. You want to make sure you've got one that's specifically for formulation. And if you're going to be making big batches, then it's worth it. But I would say in general, if you're making sort of on average up to about 200-gram batches of oleogels, you can do that quite comfortably by hand. You might not want to use a mini whisk. You might want to use a slightly bigger whisk, but comfortably 200 grams you can do by hand quite easily. And I think nobody tends to make, unless you're manufacturing things for a business, you don't tend to make any more than that of oleogel, because as Anna said, even if you're washing your face with it every day, twice a day, you probably won't get through half a kilo of oleogel in 9 months. So
No.
You would want to do smaller batches for that. But
yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I would recommend everybody have a go at making one by hand, just because it's fun. That's just my personal opinion, though. Feel free to skip straight to making bigger batches if you want to. But yeah.
And one thing I will add to that as a caveat is, even if you're using the kit, you still have to drop things in slowly. So if you're making a bigger batch, the aliquots that you're going to use will get bigger because of the size of the batch is bigger overall. But you still have to add them in slowly. So even if you're using a mixer, you still have to sit there with your little beaker and go like that the whole time. So it's not something that you can just switch on, bang it all in and leave it. It does still need that care and attention and that TLC.
Yes.
And jumping back slightly to the last question, one thing I was going to add is, because if you've got ingredients like sucragel, they have such a high content of glycerin, which means that if you're not adding any water-based products, they are self-preserving, and it's the glycerin that will do that for you. Because anything that you're adding in that's oil-based, the glycerin has self-preserves the gelling agent itself. And if you're adding in any oil, then you don't need to add any extra preservatives from that point. They can handle a little bit of water-based extract, as Anna said, but you have to look at the manufacturer's guidelines for each one as to how much that is, but it is a fine line. So if you go over that, you'll probably see that you'll start needing to use preservatives, but something like Preservative Eco is quite easy to incorporate into an Oleogel, and it's quite easy to add one in if you need it.
Yes, thank you, Brooke, for expanding on that one. It's always a popular, slightly controversial topic, but yeah, it is possible to make them without any preservatives, but it's also possible to add them in as well. So you've got both options there. Somebody's asked if there will be a replay. I believe we are everywhere. We are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, and I think you can watch the replay to this. So please don't worry if you've just joined us. Thank you so much to everybody who has joined us live, who has all the questions. They were fantastic questions today. I really hope that you've enjoyed learning a little bit more about oleogels and hearing about the kinds of topics that we have at the lab at Formula Botanica. Please do go and register for our vitamin C webinar. If you want to learn more about the lab, if you want to learn more about vitamin C, we have lots more free content for you there with the free webinar. And I can see that somebody has put the link up in the comments. Thank you so much. We are going to sign off for today, but just to let you know that we have another really popular topic from the lab that we're going to bring you next week. Our colleagues Beatrice and Therese are going to be talking about the topic of bakuchiol, which is a really, really popular retinol alternative that is, trending, has been really strong in the industry. And if you want to know more about bakuchiol, we will be running a similar kind of live event to this one, so please do come and join us. And just a reminder that all of this amazing content that we're talking to you about comes from our membership, the lab at Formula Botanica. So if you want to know more about the lab, if you want to be a member, the link is in the comments so that you can have a look at the lab webpage and see what is involved. So thank you so much, everybody. We have really enjoyed talking to you about the topic of oleogels. Thank you, Brooke, for joining me.
Thank you, Anna, for hosting us, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you love making oleogels as much as we do.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.